Welcome to the Group Dentistry Now Show, the voice of the DSO industry. Kim Larson and Bill Newman talk to industry leaders about their challenges, successes, and the future of group dentistry. Visit groupdentistrynow.com for more DSO analysis, news, and events. Looking for a job or have a job to fill? Visit joindso.com. We hope you enjoy today's show.
Welcome to the Group Dentistry Now Show. I am Bill Newman, and we have Mike White, CPA, here today with us. And we're going to talk about, unfortunately, all things COVID-19, but he's going to really lay out some plans. He's working right now with a lot of DSOs, so he can give you a little bit of insight as to what's going on, what some best practices are, and how to deal with this really unprecedented crisis. So, Mike, thanks for being here today. I know you're super busy.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And I think it's important for, us to get information out as much as we possibly can during this time for those that have advisors and those that don't. And I think it's good to be here and share some insight. So thanks for having me.
Yep. So for folks that don't know Mike, and most of you probably do, I mean, he speaks at just about every DSO conference that up until recently was happening, and now there aren't any. So that you get to see him again. But Mike is either on a panel, or he's actually has his own session that'll talk about financial and accounting services for emerging groups and DSOs. But again, thanks for being here. Mike is with CLA, Clifton Larson Allen, financial services firm, a CPA, accounting, CFO services. Mike is going to get into exactly what services CLA provides, but Mike specifically focuses in on the dental space, so that being emerging dental groups, DSOs, solo practitioners. And Mike is based in Texas, and we'll talk a little bit about, again, what CLA provides for their clients, specifically in the dental space. And then we've got some questions for Mike on how to handle this crisis.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. And it's funny when you say based in Texas. I think up to this point, I was on the road for 8 weeks straight. So going from on the road to not leaving my office, which seems like all day, every day, not leaving my office. It is such an unprecedented time. But, CLA is a CPA firm, a national CPA firm, about 120 offices nationwide. I had merged in my practice. Some of you know me as Mike White from MWA, now Mike White from CLA. So I came in to lead the DSO team, and along with lead the dental team along with Chris Abel in Phoenix. We kind of work through that whole process, but we do focus on everything from solo practices to some of the largest DSOs in the nation. Me and my team tend to focus on the emerging group, 3 to 15, 3 to 25 location groups. And that's been, a fun place to play in. But everything from tax advisory and tax accounting and, of course, CFO services. What we've been doing a lot of lately is advisory and helping practices this time. So looking forward to getting into that a little bit.
Well, thanks, Mike. And so Mike is going to give us hopefully some words of wisdom here. And again, unprecedented times. So the advisory services is probably all you're doing now, and they've pushed back some dates for filing tax returns and estimated payments. So I think everything probably you're doing right now is advisory. Yeah.
For me specifically, I don't do taxes anyway, so it works out really well.
Good for you.
But my team does. My team does. So yeah, my team does. So
there you go. So let's talk about general preparedness. So just from a standpoint of preparing right now, what should practices be doing?
Yeah, and so many practices today I'm still talking to that are a little frozen in the situation as far as what they're doing, what they should be doing, and what conversations they should be having. Right out of the gate, we need to be looking to preserve cash flow. And how do we preserve cash flow is, especially if we don't have a lot of money coming in from insurance, still be segregating your insurance to see what is collectible, what can I work during this time, who should be working it. And we're going to get into the team part of this in a little bit. Talking to your landlord, can I defer my rent? Give me 3 months. I'm not asking for 3 months free. You can add it to the back end of my lease, but can you give me 3 months? Talking to your banks. Most banks, now there are a couple that I've heard that are not doing deferments at this time, but if they say no to you, keep asking. Most banks are doing 90 days deferment, interest only. But the critical thing, I've only seen this once so far, but that doesn't mean there isn't more. Make sure it's not a balloon payment at 90 days. If you're trying to preserve cash and you don't have much cash coming in 90 days, you may not have a whole lot of cash to just catch up all your loan payments at once. So make sure they re-amortize your loan and stretch those out a little bit. Talk to your vendors. Make sure your mission critical vendors are in place and caught up to current. Again, part of your cash flow management, but caught up to current. And then work with them on any additional expenses that may come in over this next time and see if they'll delay those a little bit. And then, of course, start talking to your team and making that determination. Going into March 31st, that critical day of, do I furlough my employees or terminate them? And of course, we'll get into more details there, but that's going to be a critical date in this preservation of cash. Who are you going to keep? If you have an operations team, if you have centralized ops, who are you keeping during this time to help you manage the schedule, get everybody scheduled for recare? Who are you keeping for billing management? Do you need your entire team? Probably not, but maybe one or two people. Are you keeping your accountant in place to help you from advisory or cash flow management and vendor management, that type of stuff? Those are the things that we should be doing now, is assessing our situation. For those of you who have seen me speak, I'm a big budget guy. So there's no better time to start budgeting process to understand at least the next 90 days, 180 days.
Yeah, great point about the budgeting. All right, so big question, terminate versus furlough.
Yeah. I'm going to continue to come back to cash flow. I'm certainly not an HR person, and I want to make sure you talk to your HR or employment lawyers or whatnot to make sure you do it properly. But, just to give you insight, if you furlough your team or you close your office, you're effectively keeping that team on, and they could be applying for credits or forcing you to pay in those two payroll credit acts, where you had the 80 hours if you tested positive for COVID-19, or the 12 weeks, if your family is sick or they're out of school or whatever, there's 5 specific buckets they could fall in. The first one, the 80 hours, is up to $511 a day for 10 days, $5,110. And the second was the $200, or up to 2/3 of their pay per day for 12 weeks. So we're looking at preserving cash flow. If we have that to float, now remember, they're credits. So what the government is saying is we should be able to apply for credits against that compensation up to those limitations. But if we look at it, they're saying they're going to try to do that on a quarterly basis with your 941. So if we're next 941's not till the end of June, so let's say refunds coming at the end of July, maybe August, again, this will be the first time they ever do this. Can you hold on that long in order to do that? If not, you should be looking at terminating, getting with your employment lawyer, your HR, and terminating appropriately, not to hinder your employees and unfortunate situations that is, but you're trying to preserve the business. And there's a lot of practices nationwide that are doing this. I would say the majority of my DSOs are terminating. Terminating and layoff is effectively the same thing, but most of them are terminating. Some of my solo practices are just determining to furlough or closing the office, if you will. But it really comes down to, can you afford this for 3 months, 6 months, whatever it may be?
Right, and that's another big question. What's the time frame? And it varies right now, state to state. Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. And, Bill, you and I were talking just a bit ago, the president came out last night and said that recommendations till the end of April. Originally it was Easter. And of course that could continue to stretch depending on where we are in the spike of these cases and what's happening. And then of course it becomes a state by state, even county by county. Here in Texas, the state of Texas is determining not to make a county decision. So letting all the county, governors and Congress and all that stuff, they're letting them decide what they're going to do. And here in County, I don't have to get an order, just a be smart order, basically. But Dallas County does, and Fort Worth County does, and all that stuff. But, when we look at Washington, they've recommended the dental practices be close to May 18th. And California practices, they're talking June is when they think they're going to be opened. Oregon came out last night, and you and I were texting yesterday, Bill, as far as, there's something going around saying possibly September. I think that's got to be clarified. We don't know that one for sure, so I don't want anybody in Oregon to panic, but there's a lot of dates being thrown around is really what it comes down to. Right. Yeah. A ton of confusion. So, let's talk about, so we address the furlough versus terminate. What else with your team members? Communication. This is a very scary time as human beings that we all are.
this is a very scary time for all of us. I mean, we don't know. I myself, I spoke to you, Bill, and I myself wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I used to be an early guy at 3:30 or 4, but now my new time is 2. And this morning was 1:56, and I'm not sure why it's getting earlier and earlier, but there's just so much that's going through all of our heads. Your employees are in the same boat. You're in the same boat. So communication. I'm still getting some CEOs and some operations and all that good stuff that are having those conversations on a regular basis with the team, giving a weekly update. Hey, here's a weekly town hall. Just want to get you some information where we are, and then of course being ready. The biggest thing is, at the end of this, dentistry isn't going away. We're going to have to stand this back up. So what does that look like? Here we are about week 1, week 2, depending on where you are in the nation. In this, process, I'm going on 2.5 weeks, being home. But when you start looking at this process, give it 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, we have to open our clinics back up. What does that look like? So I think you start shifting the mindset today of what's next and how do we open our clinics, and keeping that communication with your team going right now is going to be critical. So we're going to dive into that opening schedule back up here a little bit.
Oh, great. Good. So again, we addressed this a little bit earlier on, but so how long should a practice or a group of practices plan to close?
Yeah. So I think they have to look state by state when they're looking at what their plans are. Again, here in Texas, most of them are looking at probably, end of April, now probably beginning of May after last night's presidential order or recommendation, I should say. In Washington, they've been kind of given a clear, defined May 18th. And several states have been given a defined number. I think for all intents and purposes, when we're scheduling recare and getting our patients rescheduled that we've missed at this point, we go after that first date. We say, okay, this is the date I've been given at this time. Let's start filling that schedule at this time for then. If the date changes again, then we worry about that then. And again, it's just like we're communicating to our team. We've got to communicate to our patients, with our patients about what are we doing to sterilize our office? What are we doing for preventative measures? How are we preparing to have the right equipment in place in order to serve you? Because of course, everybody's been talking about the depleted, equipment that's needed, the PPE that's needed for all of us to operate. Of course, they've been recommending dentists turn their supplies in. So when you start looking at that, making sure you're getting the necessary supplies to be able to open by that date you're planning to open by. If it's 4 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, what is your plan? And then the bigger conversation as we kind of dive into that is, the longer this stretches out, my belief is, and again, it's the assumption we're making, it's the assumption we're modeling out, is we're going to go from, 0 to, we're not going to go back to 100 patients, 100% of patients. If this goes out 12 weeks, we'll probably end up at a 50% schedule or 40% schedule, 60% schedule. But so many people will be unemployed, no dental insurance, or just scraping by with cash. So the last thing they need to do, in their minds, they need to put food on the table, rent. They don't think, will they prioritize dentistry? I'm not telling you what they will. Will they prioritize dentistry? We hope they do. It's necessary. Oral health that we think we're learning during this time is very critical. But, will they look at it that way, and will they fill our chairs back up immediately? So if this goes a few weeks, I actually think we can get 110% of our schedule. So open up hours, open up days, and really try to start getting our patients that missed up during this time, as opposed to kind of stretching it out like we would. So.
Yeah, so that's the great unknown. Who is it? Are they going to come back online right away, or is there going to be a delay? And what is that? Is it 50%? Is it 80%? No, nobody really knows. Right. So yeah,
you got to plan for those what if scenarios.
Yep, right. And to your point, the longer it goes, certainly the more devastating it'll be for really the country, because it's not just dental practices that are going to be offline, but it's going to be people losing their jobs. So it'll be interesting to see. But let's hope we look at sometime in May. Miss others. So we talked a little bit about how long you should be planning on closing, and that really depends state by state right now. Let's talk about we talked about furloughing, right, and then terminating, but do we keep anybody right now? So who should we retain?
Yeah. So if you're an emerging group, let's just say, and kind of define emerging group right now, and I've always looked at buckets, so 0 to 3 locations. if you were 0 to 3 locations, you probably don't have much of a corporate team today. You're probably doing a lot yourself. You're wearing a lot of hats. You're that CEO, CFO, COO, HR, one of the same, and you've outsourced many functions. At that point, if you're going to keep anybody, it may be your outside advisor that's going to help you with cash flow modeling, and it may be working with your outside HR company to help you, transition the employees out and transition them back in. And of course, whoever's doing that billing for you, if it's one person or one per office, definitely keeping at least one of them, or half-time, maybe not full-time, but getting them to work insurance, and it may be you stepping in to work those claims as well. But certainly when you're at the smaller scale and you don't have a big corporate team, when you start looking at 3 to 7 locations, 3 to 8 locations, you may have one regional manager, you may have a billing person, maybe you brought bookkeeping in-house. The people that you're keeping are about the same. It's just, are they outsourced, insourced, and where are they? But I'm really looking at, for at least the transitional period, getting the scheduler to schedule the back end. If we have a date, and again, I'll pick in Texas, our date is middle of April. If we have our date here, then I would start filling that schedule for that date that we can open, and start worrying about the team maybe a day before, 2 days before, for training, reacclimation, cleaning, sterilization, and just inventory of what we have during that time. If it's, that's when we start working through it. But we want to start collecting money during this time as much as we can. Work off those old collections. Try to understand what our plan is around that. Work off communication with your vendors from an accounting perspective, and what's going on, and who's going to defer you, who's going to shut you out during this time. And then HR, of course, as we talk about transition of employees. But, the regional manager may not be as busy right now. Maybe you need them to help communicate to the staff, but this is a good time at that level to really reach out and be at the forefront of communication. As you get to 715 and 15 and up, you're starting to build more and more of that team in-house. I would keep as little, as few functions as possible to just get the necessities done. And those necessities are getting the schedule filled up on the back end from a planning standpoint, getting your vendors worked out, and then, of course, taking care of your employees at the HR perspective. That's what my main recommendations are. And, it may not be that you keep them the entire time, but certainly you need some help during this transition time.
Yeah, there's a lot to really prepare for. Well, to deal with now, and then as things come, as the world comes back online, as everything comes back online, and dentists are able to provide services again, how do you have that schedule already full? And that'd be a challenge as well. So scheduling makes sense. Somebody that's going to deal with your vendors, collections make a lot of sense as well.
Yeah, and I even think some of the things that you could be doing as a leader is communicating to your patient base again. And I know I brought that up earlier, but stopping all media with your patient base, letting them know that you guys are okay, this is what we're doing. Getting to know the team a little bit, letting them know what you're taking precautionary measures, letting them know what you're doing in the community. How are you helping in the area? I mean, all this stuff is goodwill. All these people are looking for, one, good information. All of us turn the news on way too much during the day right now. And seeing terrible information. So let's see some spotlights, let's see some good information, and let's give those patients some comfort in what you're doing to make sure they're taken care of when they come back. Because that's going to be key. We want them coming back.
Right. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about loans.
Yeah.
So should a dentist be taking new loans? They may need to, or they may at least be thinking about doing something like that right now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's several loan options today, and there's information still coming out. So I'm going to talk through, and a lot of this is just recommendations I've been learning and talking to, the bankers of the world, if you will, a lot of them frequently. But, we go back to that cash flow plan, if you will. What are you doing to stockpile reserves and protect that ultimate business? Where we don't need to leverage, I don't like to leverage. However, if we take this down to, there's the express loan that was out there. 25,000 have gotten raised a little bit as well. A lot of people are not spending time kind of applying for that one. So it becomes the EIDL loan, or the disaster recovery loan, which is the traditional 7A product up to $2 million. You go through your underwriting process and everything there. That is a loan for a while that I was telling everybody to apply for. I'm actually telling everybody to apply for EIDL and the CARES Act loan. you can't take both of them, but, make sure you have a plan for one of them to receive, if you will. The terms on it's fairly favorable. In the EIDL loan, that is actually a recovery loan, there is no debt forgiveness. I know a lot of people are asking about the debt forgiveness, which is part of the CARES Act. But at least it gives you funding if you need it, if you aren't able to get the CARES Act loan. So again, apply for both. But EIDL loan is you're going through the SBA website, you're filling out the application. It's a short process. They really need three things. The 4506T, your personal financial statement, then it's an income verification type deal. There are several people that are still helping people through that, including CLA. We actually have an SBA team that we're working with on our team that's helping people fill out these applications as well. Then we shift gears into the CARES Act. The CARES Act is a new loan, came out Friday, everything got approved Friday evening, as we know. A lot of interpretation still reading through the 880 pages document that it is, and a lot of banks trying to get their hands around what happens for them, because this one is they delegated authority, meaning they're going to work through their SBA lenders in order to get these loans out there. So when talking to the banks of the world, and we won't name names this morning, but all of them are actively communicating. When I was emailing at 2:30 this morning, I had banks responding to me already this morning. So when we're looking at this process, they're all just as active as we are trying to get this out. But the CARES Act, it has the forgivable portion. Right now, as we understand it, it's going to be based on 2.5 times operating payroll. And that, there are limitations there. So up to $100,000 in compensation will be phased down after that. There is forgivable portions for payroll, rent, utilities, and your debt payments, if you will. But since you're only getting to borrow up to 2.5 times your payroll, it's not going to cover everything on that forgivable portion. And they haven't really given a whole lot of details on what's forgivable and what's not and all that good stuff, or I'm sorry, how it will be forgivable. It is the forgivable portion for those 4 buckets, apologies. But it's how will I process? What other application will I have to fill out in 12 months or 13 months or whatnot? There are contingencies on, having your payroll back to a certain point by the end of June, up to 75% of that point by the end of June. So as we start looking through our cash flow plan of when do I hire my employees back, well, if we don't know that we're going to be operational by then or fully operational by then, well, we have 75% of the team back up. So, I want to make sure I'm very optimistic. It's an incredible offer. It's something that the government is doing a great job putting together. But I want to make sure as we run the entire cash flow plan, I've had a lot of conversations over the weekend of people saying, I'm just going to hire everybody back and that's going to pay for it. Well, yes and no, but if this goes more than 8 weeks, which is the forgivable portion, then we may have some issues, if you will, and your floating payroll beyond that point. And of course, when will the loan be forgiven? Well, it's forgiven in 12 months. So as you're working through this, absolutely apply for the money, EIDL loan and the CARES Act. Work with your local bank first. If you're unsure if they do SBA lending, then ask around or reach out to me or you, and we can make some recommendations. And definitely kind of use that funds to support their business during this time. So
Great.
A lot of information, I know.
It's great information. Yeah. No, thanks for cutting through a lot of the chaos. I mean, it's definitely, interesting time, but at least there are some options out there. And so your recommendation is apply for both.
My recommendation is apply for both. And I know there's a lot of nuances and I rambled off a lot of information there. And there's even more that I'd have to be telling you for being specific. So when you're talking to your banker, when you're talking to your team, or again, reach out to us and I'm happy to talk through it with you. Let's have that conversation about what do you specifically need to do. So by default, apply for both and then find out what situation. I actually have some practices that the EIDL loan makes more sense to them even over the forgivable portion. So when you're looking at that situation, don't just think grant money is the better option. Yep. In some cases, that EIDL loan, it's incredibly cheap money, long-term, and it kind of really works out in some people's operations to help them better. So be mindful of that. And, it's not one size fits all at all.
Okay. That's great. Great. Really, really, really great information, Mike. So, and next and last question, which is, where can we get these resources? Because we heard all this great information, but it's a lot. So where can I read more about this? How can we contact you? What other resources are out there?
Yeah, and on the contact us standpoint, I believe, Bill, you'll put our contact information up there. Just go ahead and put my personal email address up and have people reach out to me directly, because I'm fielding a lot of questions myself and working with my team and all that. But, our CLA Connect has a COVID resource page.
And we'll link to that.
Bill, and we'll link to that. And Group Dentistry Now, I know you're putting out a lot of great content right now as well. So, I would say you start with the resources such as Group Dentistry Now, you look at CLA's website, and then go to your state association and state health policy institute as well to find out what is the recommendations for your office closures. If you aren't working with us, we welcome the opportunity, but during this time, talk to your CPA. Most CPAs I'm talking to, and I am talking to my peers, are keeping up with this information. They are talking to their bankers, and they're becoming advocates for their clients, because we all want to see you through this. We all want to see this industry survive and thrive during this time. So that's the biggest thing is, those are the big resources I would talk to. Talk to your advisor, talk to myself, and take a look at what you guys are pushing out at Group Dentistry, and let's have a good conversation and help each other through. The other thing, just as you mentioned, I do show up to a lot of conferences. I probably won't be at another one this year, unfortunately, but when we start looking at it from the standpoint, peer-to-peer was always great at the DSO conferences. So those DSOs, those other groups you've met before, don't just think because you're not at a conference, you won't speak to it. I know Emmett Scott's been putting out some great information. I've
Absolutely.
done podcasts of his as well. And, a lot of these DSOs are stepping up to help their peers. So if it's not from one of us, by all means, reach out to another DSO or reach out to me, and I can try to make some introductions if I know them. And, let's all rise together in this situation.
Yeah, great point. The DSOs seem to be really sharing. So whether it's peer-to-peer or big DSO to emerging group, you see a lot of that going on. And I think the industry's always been that way, but certainly more so now than ever.
Yeah, agreed. 100% agree.
Well, Mike White, thank you for sharing. We really appreciate this. This is, again, unprecedented times. So I think, as an industry and with people like resources like you and CLA, we can get through this together.
Yeah, thanks so much for the time, everybody. And by all means, reach out. This isn't a sales pitch. I'm here to help through this process and be there just as you are, Bill. So thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we'll have Mike's contact info, and you can reach out to him and the resources that we talked a little bit about. But until next time, thanks everybody for joining us on Group Dentistry Now.
The Group Dentistry Now Show has listeners across North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. If you like our show, subscribe today, and please tell your colleagues about us.